What is going on, everybody? Psych Perspectives, GeoFux here. And again, I just feel like I'm going to be making a lot of videos like this ongoing. We're going to be discussing 4547's administration and how they are attempting to freeze federal funding to a lot of social service programs, social service safety nets that the U.S. federal government typically funds. Now, this was made aware this past Monday, January 27th, a week after the inauguration of 4547 and a week after the other executive orders that were extremely bigoted and targeting very specific demographics of people. Well, this time it's even a more wide target. Thankfully, U.S. district judge, a federal judge, was able to block it for the moment, for the time being, thanks to U.S. District Judge Lauren Alican. I apologize if I am butchering it. But they were able to block it. So this will still allow federal agencies and states and other organizations to receive federal dollars. So one of the reasons behind this is that under 4547's administration, they're targeting DEI programs, okay? Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. They want those to be completely halted. And agencies that are currently under question, under investigation by the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, they're looking at over 2,000 plus programs that the U.S. federal government funds, okay? And looking at it as, well, we're targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI programs. So this is why 45 and 47's administration is looking at over 2,000 plus programs and potentially freezing the funding or drastically reducing and cutting the funding that these states, programs, organizations receive from the federal government. So, for example, one of those many programs that they are looking to freeze, if not drastically reduce and cut, is the Head Start program, which is really odd to me because the Republicans and the conservatives and the Trumpkins, they all claim to be pro-family, right? Pro-family values, pro-women and children, yet they're trying to cut programs that benefit families, women, and children. Make it make sense. The Head Start program literally provides money to local organizations to run free and comprehensive preschools and early learning programs for low-income families, which arguably in today's economy, and even before the economy became so horrible, there have always been more poor people, more working poor, more working class, more working poor, more low-income people and families than any other demographic of wealth-related groups, okay? And mind you, this also funds the enrollment of more than 778,000 plus young children and their families. So much for being pro-family. They also want to cut or freeze. They want to freeze the money and or drastically cut and reduce the funding to farm-to-school grant programs. Which in this case, that's another bad situation because this is also the same Republican, conservative, Trumpkin party that claims to be pro-agriculture and farmers. Yet the farm-to-school grant program literally connects local farmers with children nutrition programs to allow schools to provide fresh foods for students directly from their communities. So you're cutting funding from farmers in our local areas to be able to provide fresh vegetables, fruits, food to the community and to the children at the schools. So the children aren't gonna get quality foods. They're not gonna get healthy fruits and vegetables. And also you're cutting funding directly to the farmers in our local areas, in our local cities, municipalities, counties, states, what have you. Now, keep in mind, that's not the only thing that they want to stop, okay? Because, again, a lot of this is basically related to them halting DEI programs, okay? They also this would also potentially freeze federal funding, if not drastically reduce and cut federal funding to nonprofit security grant programs, which these provide security enhancements to nonprofits, including faith-based organizations. That's right. Even the religious-based organizations are targeted in this to help mitigate risk of violent attacks or hate-based crimes. Again, I thought y'all were Christian, Protestant, so heavy into the religion, yet you're also going to harm the faith-based nonprofit organizations that receive federal funding. And mind you, they're only targeting a very specific piece, right? They don't want people to be able to investigate hate crimes, to mitigate hate crimes, to prevent hate crimes, because they're all for, you named it, marginalized communities being targeted for hate crimes and violence. They don't care that LGBTQIA plus people are going to be facing homophobic and transphobic hate crimes. They don't care that African American, black and brown people, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, Indigenous, Native American people are potentially going to be facing racial-based hate crimes. They don't want you to be able to investigate, hold people accountable, or protect those communities, right? Like, it's all in the paper. Information is always in the description box on what I'm talking about. And I always encourage you to also fact check me, right? Fact check me, and also do your own investigation. Critically think. Another potential program that was going to be potentially freezing federal funds from receiving, if not drastically reducing or cutting the federal funding that it receives, is Section 8. Section 8, the House Choice Voucher housing, okay, affordable housing, which provides rental assistance to more than 4 million plus households, which is roughly around 7.3 million plus people, through both vouchers and direct subsidy to properties. So a lot of people that are low income, that are essentially at the poverty line or hovering underneath the poverty line, we're going to potentially lose housing, shelter, at a time when the rent prices across the United States of America are astronomically high. I mean, your average rent price across the country is well over $1,000 plus a month, give or take. Obviously, in certain cities and states, it's lower than $1,000 slightly. But overwhelmingly, if we're looking at it from an average of all of the states in the USA, your average rent is $1,000 plus per month. And with Section 8, or the House Choicing Voucher, it allows people who are at the poverty level or hovering a little over or a little under, give or take, to only spend 30% of their earned income or their adjusted earned income or gross monthly income on their rent, which it is recommended across the board that we only spend 30% of our income to pay for rent if we are renting a place to stay. So, for example, if you make $2,000 a month, your rent should only be $600 a month. If you're making $3,000 a month, your rent should only be $900 a month. It's only supposed to be 30% of your income. Even though, arguably, your average person, if they're not able to get a housing choice voucher, they're not able to get on Section 8, they're not eligible, or there's not enough vouchers to go around because so many people need assistance, your average person is paying well over 30% of their income on rent. Okay? And again, so much for the Republican, conservative, Trump-style party that claims to support women and children and families. You're gonna make a bunch of children be homeless. You're gonna make a bunch of children go without food. You're gonna make a bunch of families go without food and shelter. Okay. The other program that was potentially going to be froze, right? Okay. And or potentially have the funding that they receive from the federal government drastically reduced and cut was the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP. CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Program, which provides funding to states for comprehensive coverage of more than 7.2 million kids and pregnant women, pregnant people who earn too much to qualify for Medicaid but cannot afford private insurance. So again, you're harming women and children, you're harming parents and children, you're harming families, you're harming kids, okay? And once again, notice a lot of these programs and agencies are put into place because we've allowed poverty to exist. If we would start holding companies, okay, jobs, employers accountable for paying living wages, paying family wages, so people could actually take care of themselves and their children and their families and their responsibilities, because the wages would reflect the actual cost of living, it would actually take inflation, aka price gouging, into consideration and be matching the cost of living. We wouldn't need all of these programs to begin with. But because this government has allowed corporations and businesses and companies and jobs and employers to consistently underpay their employees, consistently keep people impoverished, living check to check, we have to have these programs and initiatives put in place as a safety net to keep people afloat. All right. Another program that was potentially going to be froze from federal funding, if not potentially receive drastic decreases and cuts to the federal funding that it received, the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, WIC, W-I-C, Women, Infant, and Children, which provides nutrition assistance for 1.5 million infants, babies, and 1.6 million new mothers, parents, and 3.8 million very young children, typically age 5 or younger. Was gonna freeze that federal funding and or potentially reduce it significantly, as in cutting the funding. So again, I thought women, infants, and children and family were so important. You know, you're so anti-abortion, anti-pro-choice, anti-bodily autonomy, yet when the baby is here, you don't want to help it be taken care of in any form or fashion. You don't want it to have food. You don't want it to have health insurance. You don't want it to have shelter. You don't want it to have education. You don't want it to have health care. But we're going to force you to have children. We're going to force you to give birth so you can live in poverty indefinitely. Welcome to America. Also, it was going to potentially freeze federal funding, if not drastically decrease and cut federal funding to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, aka food stamps, aka EBT, which provides funding to help buy groceries for over 42.6 million Americans. 42.6 million Americans or more Americans rely on SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, so they can buy groceries and get food for themselves, for their children, for their families. Again, they don't want you to have food. This was also going to potentially freeze federal funding, if not drastically decrease and cut federal funding to Title I education grants, which provides funding to more than 50,000 plus elementary and secondary public schools. So your elementary, your middle school, high schools in low income neighborhoods where the education needs are greater. Again, a lot of you voted against your own best interests. A lot of you voted against programs that you currently use, that a lot of us are using, a lot of us need, but you voted against it. And I'm going to keep saying it. A lot of people voted against their own interests, their own best interests, and programs that benefit the vast majority of the people in this country because of ignorance and being uninformed and uneducated, and also because people are just straight up bigots. Okay, like people are racist, people are homophobic, they are transphobic, they're misogynistic, they're classist. So many things going on here, to the point that you got Trump supporters that are literally living in trailer parks, who are also on housing choice vouchers, Section 8, who are also receiving food stamps, okay, the supplemental nutrition assistance program, who are also receiving Medicaid, who children are also going to the public schools that are receiving Title I educational grants. Okay. And it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. They were also going to potentially freeze federal funding, if not drastically reduce and cut federal funding to the IDEA Special Education and Rehabilitation Service Grant, which provides federal funding to states to help 7.5 million school-age kids and 800,000 adults with disabilities obtain education and or employment. So again, if you are living with disabilities, if you are lower income, if you are a child, okay, if you are a woman or a parent, or you are a caregiver for a family, they don't want you to live. They don't want you to thrive. They don't want you to have any type of support or assistance. But yet they want to constantly run these campaigns about women and children and family values, and how they're going to lower the cost of groceries. Meanwhile, the cost of groceries have not been lowered with any of these executive orders. In fact, eggs have doubled in price since he's gotten in office. I mean, literally, a carton of eggs is going to run you damn near $7. It was $3.50. So I'm just saying, how is targeting these programs lowering the cost of groceries? All right. They also wanted to cut the federal government freeze, was potentially also going to, if not drastically cut or decrease the funding to the Children Nutrition Program, including the National School Lunch Program, which provides federal funding to states to provide free or low-cost meals to nearly 30 million children on an average day, right? So if we're looking at it from a work week or a business week, when we look at Monday through Friday, that is 5 days where 30 million children are receiving free to low-cost meals. So you don't want kids to have food. You don't want them to go to school. You don't want them to have health care. You don't want them to have food. You don't want them to have shelter. You don't want them... It's insane. Okay? Remember this when they talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because once again, a lot of you thought it was just going to be the LGBTQIA plus community. You thought it was going to be the transgender community. You thought it was only going to be the Black and brown, Hispanic and Latino, Native American, indigenous people of color communities. And then you completely left out, you too are also a part of diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right, the other program that was going to be potentially frozen out for federal funding, if not drastically decreased and cut federal funding to, the Child Care and Development Block Grants, or the CCDBG, okay, which provides federal funding to states to help who? To help low-income families afford childcare, servicing more than 1.3 million children every single month. So again, this is an all-out attack against low-income people, working-class people, working poor people, middle-class people. Because a lot of people who claim to be middle class are not middle class. And what I mean by that is, basically in today's economy, if you're not making six figures, you are no longer considered middle class. Okay? It just needs to be said. It used to be a time $50,000 a year was a middle class salary, and that was like 10 plus years ago. Today, you're working check to check just like everybody else. You probably have a part-time job or a side hustle to offset the cost of living, because $50K a year is no longer a decent wage or salary. Not in today's economy, not in today's inflation. I'm just being real. Remember that. It was also going to cut freezing potentially, if not drastically cut and reduce funding to the Community Health Center program, which helps keep the door open for more than 1,300 plus community health centers, serving over 31 million plus people, 31 million plus patients across the country each year. And the federal government grants make up 11% of the total revenue for community health centers. So thanks to the U.S. District Judge, Lauren Alican, and I apologize if I am mispronouncing your last name or first name. I apologize. But because of that U.S. District Judge, we have a block against 4547's administration cutting or completely freezing the federal funding to these programs. But if this is enacted and is able to go through, you're going to see a lot of community health centers close, which is going to harm a lot of low-income people, which is going to harm a lot of people of color, which is going to harm a lot of women and children, harm a lot of families. Because where are they going to get their health care? Where are they going to go to get doctor's appointments? You know what I'm saying? Where are they going to go to get their labs? Who's going to check their blood pressure? Who's going to look at their diabetes? Who's going to look at, their dental, if they need to get, just think about these things, right? Also, Medicaid provides matching funding to states for health insurance, helping nearly 1 in 5 Americans, including low-income people, pregnant women, pregnant people, seniors, and people with disabilities. So keep that in mind when you hear about these federal programs, agencies having federal freezes and that are going to potentially freeze the funding that they receive from the federal government if or drastically decrease, cut the federal funding that the programs would be receiving from the federal government, and how this ultimately impacts everybody or most people. Most people are receiving some type of social service program, some type of social service safety net. A lot of us know people that are benefiting from that, who need that. And I'm going to say this too, because privilege is a hell of a thing. So when I look at myself, I don't need Section 8. I don't need housing choice vouchers. But I don't mind a portion of my taxes going to affordable housing, Section 8, housing choice vouchers, because I don't want other people who can't afford to pay these high, out of control rents be homeless. I don't want children to be homeless. I don't want women to be homeless. I don't want men to be homeless. I don't want people to be homeless. So I don't mind a portion of my tax dollars going to that, even though I don't benefit from it at all. I'm not on Section 8. I'm not eligible. Talk about privilege. I have a full-time job currently that provides me with health care, a private health care through my employer. So I don't need Medicaid. I don't have to go to a community health center. That is a privilege that I have. But guess what? I don't mind a portion of my tax dollars going to Medicaid, going to Medicare, going to the community health centers, because I believe everybody deserves access to healthcare, and not just any healthcare, but equitable, quality, inclusive healthcare insurance, healthcare providers. So I don't mind a portion of my tax dollars going to that. I don't have children, which is a privilege as far as I'm concerned. I don't have kids. So I don't need Head Start. I don't need WIC. But guess what? I want your children to be able to have food, quality food, healthy food. I want your children to be able to go to school and get a quality education, inclusive, equitable, diverse, quality education. I want your children to have health care. I want your parents to have health care. I want your parents to have an opportunity to get an education. I don't have kids, so my kids they don't need Title I. I don't have kids, but I don't mind a portion of my tax dollars going to Title I education grants. Because low-income children deserve quality education too. Children with disabilities deserve quality education too. People with disabilities deserve housing, deserve food, deserve shelter, deserve education, deserve employment opportunities too. So I don't mind a portion of my tax dollars going to that. I just wanted to say that because a lot of people, when they're talking about these things, are talking from a place of privilege, which is why they don't care about these programs, because they themselves are not using the programs. They themselves don't benefit from the programs. So not only are they talking from a place of privilege, but they're also talking from a place of selfishness, self-centeredness. And there's a lot of people in our community who are like that. You know, and they voted like that. And you thought, again, that it was only going to target a specific demographic of people. A lot of you Republicans, a lot of you conservatives, a lot of you and Trump supporters, you voted against your own selves receiving support, receiving assistance that you greatly need. You voted against people in your own community being able to receive support that they need. This is what happens when you are a single issue voter, when you are uninformed and downright ignorant, and when you are a closed-minded bigot. I'm just going to be honest. A lot of you are now looking rather stupid because now you're like, oh, wait, that's me. Wait, I thought you said it was going to be them. Information is in the description box below, listing all the information that I just went over and then some. And as always, I always recommend that you fact check me and that you also take the time to research and critically think for yourself. But y'all, we're going to have a very crazy 4 years with the way things are going and looking. This is ridiculous.